Station Rollout Solar Array. Good morning, everyone. Joseph Zakshesky and Ken Appel with NASA Communications here to bring you this spacewalk as today.
Copy. We'll perform step 7, and I'll come back to you when we're ready for you to continue.
Okay, sounds good.
Today is the 281st spacewalk in support of the International Space Station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades. And it is a part of a busy month of spacewalks in the month of August and the very first of Expedition 75. This will also be the 4th spacewalk of 2026. As you take a look around the room here in Mission Control Houston, you will be hearing communications quite often between the crew on the ground as well as the crew aboard the International Space Station as the teams continue preparations for today's spacewalk. Let's take a closer look at the 2 NASA astronauts that will be participating in U.S. Spacewalk 96, as well as the support team. And it will be Jessica Meier that will serve as EV1, and Anil Mennon, the flight engineer aboard the International Space Station, as EV2. And throughout today's spacewalk, we will be able to identify the 2 of them, as Meier will have the red stripes, as you can see at the bottom left corner of her portrait, and Anil Mennon will have no stripes on his spacesuit. Taking a look at their career stats for spacewalks for Jessica Meier, it has been a busy time for her aboard the International Space Station, especially this most recent expedition from 74 into 75. This will be her 3rd run of her current time aboard Space Station and 6th overall, previously conducting 5 spacewalks totaling 36 hours and 6 minutes. Her most recent spacewalk was back at the end of June for U.S. Spacewalk 95, and then she also participated in U.S. Spacewalk 94 back in March, both of those with NASA astronaut Chris Williams, which Williams returned to Earth and would officially close out Expedition 74 and bring on Expedition 75 with the arrival of Anil Mennon. And for Anil, this will be his very first spacewalk of his NASA career. It is again the 281st spacewalk in support of Space Station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades, the 4th of 2026, and of course the first spacewalk for the newly minted Expedition 75. As we welcome you back inside Mission Control Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. We're currently in a communications handover with the International Space Station, and we will bring you those live views of the astronauts in Anil Mennon and Jessica Meier here shortly as they continue their pre-breathe procedures as they prepare to venture out into the vacuum of space again for U.S. Spacewalk 96. Supporting both Jessica and Anil Mennon today are going to be NASA astronauts Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno of ESA, and these 2 have supported so far every spacewalk that they have been on board inside the International Space Station, supporting Jessica Meier's, again, spacewalk number 94 and 95. That was back in March and back in June. So Jack Hathaway and both Sophie Adno in their first missions aboard the International Space Station, both of them arrived to the station back in February as a member of NASA's SpaceX Crew 12 on February 13th, and they're currently operating on their 174th day aboard the orbiting laboratory. As the teams here on the ground are currently executing a handover inside of Mission Control, let's take a closer look at who is supporting today's spacewalk from the ground in Mission Control in Houston. As he hands over control from the Orbit 1 to the Orbit 2 team, it'll be Spacewalk Flight Director Ronak Dave that will take the helm. Stephanie Wilson, NASA astronaut, will be the spacewalk communicator. We'll be hearing many communications between her and the crew outside, so that'll be with both Jessica and Anil throughout the day today. Aki Hoshide of JAXA will be the Capcom. He will communicate with the crew inside the International Space Station. Again, that crew of 7, so he will be handling communications of everything internally. Steve Villano, along with Drew Burr and Lucas Winder, will work things out as the lead spacewalk officer. and task officers for today's spacewalk. And Matt Hahn and Andrew Francis will support the spacesuit and airlock operations. And there is our first looks live inside of the Quest airlock aboard the International Space Station. And there you can see NASA astronaut Anil Mennon on the left-hand side and Jessica Meier, the commander of the International Space Station, on the right-hand side. And throughout today's spacewalk, we will have Jessica. She will have the red stripes that'll be featured on the cuff of her pants, and we'll keep an eye out for her identification markers. And for Anil Mennon, he will be in no stripes. And on the near side, against the wall, is Jack Hathaway, one of the two astronauts supporting today. And right on cue is going to be Sophie Adno, that's also supporting preparations for today's spacewalk. Again, the crew is currently executing their pre-breathe procedures, and they will do so for about 2 hours. They're about halfway through that point, and that is when they are breathing pure oxygen to remove nitrogen from their blood supply, and it helps avoid decompression sickness, or the bends, as they transition from the International Space Station to the vacuum of space. In terms of air pressure, the space station operating close to sea level that we experience here on Earth, and of course bringing it down to vacuum when they venture out into space. The astronauts have already completed some light exercises, or ISLE, where they complete those exercises in their suit. And that's all part of the pre-breathe procedures to help the body absorb oxygen faster. So these two crew members and their support crew, and Sophie Adno and Jack Hathaway, are currently in the equipment lock of the Quest airlock. This is where they get suited up and do the initial checkouts. The leak checks, which they performed earlier, all went well, and they'll continue to do checks on inspections of gloves, equipment. They'll test out their helmet cameras, which we will get great views from those as the spacewalk progresses. They'll also add their MEDOX canisters, or metal oxide canisters, that help scrub carbon dioxide from the astronauts as they perform their spacewalk today. And then eventually they'll move into the background, which is the crew lock, as Sophie Adno is floating that direction. And once we get a greater look, you'll see the equipment that'll be used for today's spacewalk. So let's take a look at what exactly these two astronauts, and Anil Mennon and Jessica Meier, will be up to today outside of the International Space Station. This is to install a mod kit on the 3B mast canister that'll again help the International Space Station prepare for the future installation of a International Space Station rollout solar array, or IROSA. Now, these solar arrays will be delivered later this year on NASA's SpaceX's 35 commercial resupply services mission, and overall will be the 7th IROSA that will provide additional power to support critical station operations, including the safe and controlled deorbit. So these two will be building out that modification kit that'll be assembled on the canister itself. They will also run the cables that will be needed to power that IROSA during that future EVA, and of course set up that EVA for future success and put it in a good configuration before eventually meandering back into the Quest airlock to complete today's spacewalk. And to better help illustrate where exactly these astronauts will be traversing today, if they were to leave the Quest airlock towards the middle of your screen and make their way down what would be the left-hand side of this graphic, the 3B section is where they will be operating today, and again adding that modification kit to that canister for the rollout solar array. Now, a similar spacewalk was conducted earlier this year. We mentioned Jessica Meier, part of U.S. Spacewalk 94 with Chris Williams back on March 18th. That was to help complete the modification and mounting hardware of the 2A channel, highlighted in green. And they would also complete the work done initially by Nicole Ayers and Ann McLean back in May of 2025, when they would help build that out. So at the completion of today's spacewalk, the yellow looking to turn green, and then the two rollout solar arrays that will again fly up on a later cargo flight, NASA SpaceX's 35, later this year. Those will then be a part of future EVAs to roll out the IROSAs. And if you're curious what the IROSA looks like, you can move all the way to the right-hand side of that image, and there you can see two rollout solar arrays. It's a great example that go over top of the International Space Station's current solar arrays. So as we make our way back inside the Quest airlock, again, the crew, Jessica Meier on the right-hand side, up against the wall, Anil Mennon on the left-hand side, currently operating through their pre-breathe procedures, and we'll continue to work towards their checklist is Jack Hathaway in the foreground, working with the teams here on the ground. And again, we'll hear additional communications and expedited communications as the crew got to work earlier this morning in preparation for today's spacewalk. In about 5 minutes or so, the crew relayed earlier that they would begin.
Airlock, just want to think. I think we're still waiting in step 7. Just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Okay, Jack, we are still working through step 7. We expect about 5 more minutes before we'll be able to give you go in step 8. However, when you get to the designated time for MEDOX changeout at 11:15, you are go for MEDOX changeout.
I understand you guys are working 7, and we're going to leave the cameras on until you guys are done with that. But I understand we can get started now with a couple PET steps, and then at 11:15, we're ready for the first MEDOX swap.
Good read.
Communication between the team here on the ground and with NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway is.
First MEDOX canister for EV1 is 1033, and Silt's got it up in the camera if you want to see.
Good number.
And Sophie Adno showing great displays is what Jack Hathaway is communicating down to the teams on the ground. The metal oxide canister that they will install in the back of the spacesuits of Jessica Meyr and Anil Menon.
And Sophie is going to unlatch Jessica's ETA and rotate her forward so she's got access.
We copy.
So as the crew and the support team of Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno working with the support team here on the ground, continuing to work through those procedures. And again, they were talking about the metal oxide canisters, or MEDOX, that we will hear. We'll hear a lot of acronyms throughout today, but that metal oxide canister is placed inside the spacesuit, and that is to remove carbon dioxide during today's spacewalks. And it can be used multiple times, and once a spacewalk is completed, they can recharge those canisters. So they're working through the equipment themselves, the serial numbers, and sharing down with the crew. And ultimately, it will be installed in the backpack, or the PLIS, the portable life support system, mounted on the back of today's spacewalkers. And again, Jessica Meyr slowly tilted a little bit facing towards the camera will be EV1 wearing the red stripes, and Anil Menon will be on the left-hand side, and now an above-view camera of Anil facing down as the crew again continuing to work through their procedures. They also mentioned HECA cameras. Those are the cameras that are mounted on the spacesuits themselves, the high-definition extravehicular mobility unit camera assembly, and that's where we're going to get great views from the astronauts as they venture out into space and perform today's spacewalk. Once all the procedures are completed and the checkouts are done, they will then install their safers to the backside of their spacesuits. That is the simplified aid for EVA rescue. Those are nitrogen thruster-powered backpacks that are added to their portable life support systems and worn by the astronauts during a spacewalk on board the International Space Station. And they act as a self-rescue jetpack, providing 6 degrees of freedom and ultimately needed if a astronaut were to become untethered and be able to safely make their way back to the orbiting laboratory. So again, we welcome you back aboard the International Space Station in preparations for today's U.S. Spacewalk 96 with NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon, as the two, Jessica on the right side, Anil in his spacesuit on the left-hand side, receiving support from Jack Hathaway, NASA astronaut, in preparations for today's spacewalk. We're just moments away from the installation of the metal oxide canisters. And you can see Jack working through those procedures with the team and the support group on the ground, again helmed by Ronak Dave, flight director inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Team, and his Momentum Flight Control Team, taking over today's spacewalk duties from Elias Mirmo and the Orbit 1 team and his service flight team. In the background, again, the crew currently in the equipment lock of the Quest airlock aboard the International Space Station. But in the background, you see the equipment necessary to complete today's spacewalk. On the portion of the top left-hand side, you can see the struts that'll be required to install the 3B mod kit to the 3B mast canister of the International Space Station. And that involves 6 different struts and a mounting bracket that the two astronauts will assemble from start to finish. That bag is about 8 feet long and over 300 pounds here on Earth, and of course in space, though seemingly weightless, still carries that mass with it. And though out of sight, Sophie Adno currently working on the portable life support system on the backside of NASA astronaut Jessica Meyr, installing the Medox canister. And there you can see Sophie swinging Jessica back up against the wall of the equipment lock as that canister put into place. Anil Mennon on the left-hand side in his spacesuit, preparing for what will be his very first spacewalk of his career, will have his metal oxide canister installed as well. And they'll continue to go over multiple checks and safety inspections before coming off of the wall and making their way into what would be the crew.
Serial number for Anil for EV2 is 1034.
Good number.
So now you get a great view of Sophie Adno swinging NASA astronaut Anil Mennon off of the equipment lock to install his metal oxide canister and unzipping the backside of the portable life support system. That backpack mounted on the back of the astronauts provides everything that they will need for today's spacewalk: self-contained, breathable atmosphere, cooling, power, and all that they can carry with them to work out into the vacuum of space for today's U.S. Spacewalk 96 and install the mod kit to the 3B canister of the International Space Station. And again, that is for the future installation of an International Space Station rollout solar array. For the astronauts in the spacesuits, continuing to also work through their pre-breathe procedures. And they did so about an hour and a half ago, began those pre-breathe procedures, breathing pure oxygen to remove nitrogen from their blood supply, and that helps avoid decompression sickness from going to a higher pressure, which is inside the International Space Station, down to vacuum at the lowest of pressures out in space. And these astronauts also did some light exercises to help speed up that process and get the oxygen supply into circulation faster. Divers experience these adjustments below the surface of the water here on Earth. Jack Hathaway, NASA astronaut in the foreground. Sophie Adno of ESA, working on the portable life support system of NASA astronaut Anil Mennon. On the left-hand side of our view here today, inside the Quest airlock of the International Space Station, installing the metal oxide canisters. And we welcome you back inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room inside of Mission Control Center, Houston, Texas, as we are experiencing a communications handover in satellites. And we will rejoin the crew aboard the International Space Station here shortly. And there you can see a great view of Flight Director Ronak Dave. That'll be on tap for today's spacewalk. He and his Momentum flight team just completed a handover. Sitting immediately to his right is Stephanie Wilson. And she will be the spacewalk communicator for today's activities outside of the orbiting laboratory. She will be the one that you will hear the voice of often talking with Jessica Meier and Anil Mennon. And immediately to her right is Aki Hoshide. He'll be the Capcom for today's events. He'll be the one communicating with the Expedition 75 crew aboard the International Space Station. And as we resume contact, we return back inside the Quest airlock of the International Space Station as Jack Hathaway and team continuing to work through today's procedures ahead of U.S. Spacewalk 96. And then as actually look to the bottom left where Anil Mennon is up against the wall of the equipment lock, you can see one of the key tools that'll be used for today's spacewalk. That is the pistol grip tool that'll be used to help assemble the 3B mod kit to the 3B canister of the International Space Station. That is the power drill, or a non-powered ratchet wrench that'll be used to help secure bolts and pins. Jessica Meier will also be equipped with that tool as well, as the two will work in tandem throughout today's spacewalk to assemble that 3B mod kit that again consists of 3 struts. They'll build an upper triangle and then have a right side and a left side that they will attach to the 3B canister. And once affixed with the center mounting bracket, that bracket will support the future installation of an International Space Station rollout solar array. And those arrays, again,
in step 18, the expended MEDOX for EV2 was 0022, and the expended MEDOX for EV1 was 0020. And also, we didn't hear you verify this earlier in step 11. Our GMT for the pause was 1121.
And station, this flight, we copied 1121. We're getting Aki enabled here. And good numbers on the MEDOX as well.
So the teams here on the ground working with Jack Hathaway there in the foreground, relaying the good information relayed about the metal oxide canisters that again will scrub carbon dioxide from the spacesuits of Jessica Meier on the right-hand side and Anil Mennon on the left-hand side. And again, for Jessica Meyr today, it will be her 6th spacewalk of her NASA career, her 3rd during this recent stay aboard the International Space Station, when she would fly up on NASA's SpaceX Crew 12 back in February, and currently operating on her 174th day in microgravity. And for Anil Menon, he would join the International Space Station's crew of 7 and would briefly be a part of Expedition 74 and officially kick off Expedition.
3 o'clock resumed, GMT 1125.
Copy 1125. Good morning, Jack.
Sir?
And there you heard the return calls from Aki Hoshide, again, today's Capcom, that will be communicating with the astronauts inside the International Space Station, and Stephanie Wilson, the spacewalk communicator, will join in once both Meyr and Anil Menon venture out into space. They continue to work through their pre-breathe procedures ahead of today's spacewalk. And again, for Jessica Meyr, her 6th EVA, 3rd during her current mission as a member of NASA SpaceX Crew 12, the current International Space Station commander. And for Anil Menon, who just arrived a little more than 22 days ago after launching on July 14th from the Baikonur Cosmodrome as a part of Soyuz MS-29, and a great above-camera view of Anil as he works through his, again, pre-breathe procedures ahead of his very first spacewalk. This is Mission Control Houston as we look inside of the Quest airlock of the International Space Station as NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Menon prepare to venture out into the vacuum of space for U.S. Spacewalk 96 in preparation of a 3B mod kit to the 3B mass canister.
We have successful manual leak checks, and we're back into procedure 1.225, step 17.
Copy that. Thanks.
Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno supporting today's spacewalkers. Jessica Meyr on the right-hand side, Anil Menon on the left in the equipment lock. And there we can see in the background a great shot through into the crew lock that they will eventually venture out into, and the equipment used for today. The larger bag that is floating towards the top of that lock is where the 6 struts and the mounting bracket that will be carried to the work site for today's spacewalk, and then the crew bag and equipment in the second bag, as we now see what will be the safers that are floating into view with ESA astronaut Sophie Adno. And these will be attached to the back of today's spacewalkers. And again, these safers, the simplified aid for EVA rescue, nitrogen thruster powered backpack used in the event an astronaut were to become untethered from the International Space Station and are able to safely maneuver back to the orbiting laboratory. So it'll be Jessica Meyr that'll receive her safer first. shortly followed by Anil Mennon. Again, we welcome you to today's live coverage of U.S. Spacewalk 96 as International Space Station Commander and NASA astronaut Jessica Meier alongside NASA astronaut Anil Mennon will venture out to be a part of what will be a busy run of spacewalks in the month of August. The first of 3 here in the near future. For Jessica Meier, having her safer currently installed after her MEDOX canister just moments ago was placed inside of her portable life support system to help scrub carbon dioxide. Anil Mennon on the left-hand side with his arms raised will receive a similar safer as the crew continues to work through its procedures in preparation for entering the crew lock in the background. Hatches will close, and then once that crew lock is brought down to vacuum, currently operating a little more than 14 pounds per square inch, similar to what we here on Earth would experience at sea level, will be brought down to vacuum, and the two will venture out into space. For Anil, it'll be his very first time, and for Jessica Meier, it'll be her 6th spacewalk, the 3rd of her current mission aboard the International Space Station. And that spacewalk will officially begin once the 2 crew members will switch over their equipment to battery power to mark the official beginning of today's U.S. Spacewalk 96. Inside of the Quest airlock of the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Jessica Meier, with now her back towards the camera, having her safer installed to her portable life support system and spacesuit. She will be EV1 labeled by the team here on the ground and will be marked by what you can see now on the cuff of her pants, the red stripes for today's U.S. Spacewalk 96. And with her safer installed, they are maneuvering Jessica into the crew lock to continue their procedures and next steps. And for Anil Mennon on the left-hand side, he will await his turn to receive his safer, and will then join Jessica in the crew lock inside the Quest airlock. Now NASA astronaut Anil Menon receiving his safer unit to the backside of his spacesuit ahead of today's U.S. Spacewalk 96. Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno, NASA and ESA respectively. Helping install those is Jessica Meier, is now already inside of the crew lock and in position. For Meier, this will be her 6th spacewalk. And for Anil Menon, this will be the very first of his NASA career. We will continue to hear communications from the spacewalkers themselves and from Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno as they continue to work through all the safety and equipment protocols and technical protocols necessary before sending them into the crew lock. And once inside the crew lock, it will begin to depress, bringing the pressure down from what's inside the International Space Station down to the vacuum of space. And from there, the 2 NASA astronauts will venture out and begin today's spacewalk to again begin to install the hardware that will modify the station's 3B power channel and prepare it for the future installation of an International Space Station rollout solar array. ESA astronaut Sophie Adno continuing to work on what is the left-hand side of NASA astronaut Anil Menon in preparation for today's spacewalk outside of the International Space Station. Jack Hathaway floating into the foreground. The crew continuing to work through their pre-spacewalk procedures as Jessica Meier joining Anil Menon for today's spacewalk, already in the crew lock in the background there that is illuminated. This view inside of the equipment lock, setting up Anil Menon for eventual entry to join Jessica into the crew lock. Teams on the ground monitoring all these procedures and continuing to work towards the start of today's spacewalk. So far, everything has been on time for both the crew and team here on the ground as pre-breathe procedures have been worked through. Medox canisters to scrub carbon dioxide have been installed. The safers have now been installed with Jessica first and now Anil as they position him. Feet to head is the positioning inside of the crew lock as Jack Hathaway moving some of the equipment necessary for today's spacewalk to allow Anil Menon to float his way in and join the International Space Station commander. Today's spacewalk support group and Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno now positioning NASA astronaut Anil Mennon inside of the crew lock of the Quest airlock inside of the International Space Station as crew aboard the station, as well as here on the ground in Mission Control, Houston, in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Now both astronauts have entered or egressed the crew lock of the Quest airlock with the necessary tools and equipment needed for today's spacewalk to again install hardware that'll help modify the station's 3B power channel and prepare it for the installation of the International Space Station Solar Array, or IROSA. And both the IROSA for 3B and the 2A power channel will arrive on a future cargo flight that'll happen later this year on NASA SpaceX's 35th Commercial Resupply Services mission. For Anil Mennon, he is the astronaut in the spacesuit with its head facing towards Hathaway and Sophie Adno. Jessica Meyr just off to what would be Anil's left, are right from our view. They are properly positioned and continue to go through their spacewalk procedures. The hatch will close. The go will be given for depressurization of the crew lock, in which it will drop to about 14.5 pounds per square inch, similar to that of sea level here on Earth, to the vacuum of space. We'll also receive the official start time of today's spacewalk once both Jessica Meyr and Anil Menon's suits have been turned on to battery power. Back inside the International Space Station's Quest airlock, we welcome you for today's live coverage of U.S. Spacewalk 96 as NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon prepare to exit the orbiting laboratory and perform the installation of hardware that will modify the station's 3B power channel and prepare it for the installation of a future International Space Station rollout solar array that'll be completed on a future spacewalk. These two astronauts are currently inside of the crew lock portion of the Quest airlock, being assisted by Sophie Adno on the bottom right in the turquoise teal shirt, and Jack Hathaway of NASA helping support the two spacewalkers today. For both Adno and Hathaway, they have supported so far every spacewalk, U.S. spacewalk, that has been on the International Space Station since their arrival as a member of NASA SpaceX Crew 12 back in February. And that is also where Jessica Meier would arrive on station, and the current International Space Station commander. She is preparing for her 6th EVA of her career, the 3rd this mission, and over her career, 36 hours and 6 minutes out in space. And for Anil Mennon, he is on his first flight to the orbiting laboratory, arriving just this past July 14th, as a member of Soyuz MS-29. So entering his 22nd day aboard the International Space Station. Everything so far has been on time for the crew and their pre-spacewalk preparations, going through pre-breathe procedures, having their metal oxide canisters installed, their HECA cameras, that is the high-definition extravehicular mobility unit camera assembly. We will see views from those cameras throughout today's spacewalk as they will work in tandem to install this 3B mod kit to the canister of the 3B channel of the International Space Station. Teams here on the ground in Mission Control Houston continuing to monitor through these steps ahead of the start of today's spacewalk as they continue to communicate down and communicate with the astronauts, making sure everything and every procedure is checked off. From this point on, the hatch will close, and the teams on the ground, as well as both Jack and Sophie, will monitor. And once that hatch is closed, we will get the go for a depressurization of the crew lock. And there we see Sophie slowly lowering it, making sure the crew bag stays inside its proper placement. And with that, the hatch has been closed of the crew lock of the Quest airlock inside the International Space Station. We're on the other side of the hatch awaits Jessica Meier and Anil Mennon of NASA, ready to venture out into space for today's spacewalk. Sophie Adno and Jack Hathaway in the foreground in the equipment lock portion, continuing to work through today's procedures. So for Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno, officially closing the hatch of the crew lock, and again taking extra precautions and making sure everything is sealed up properly as the two astronauts, Anil Mennon and Jessica Meier, are inside the crew lock, but also with a lot of equipment for today's spacewalk. The 6 struts needed to complete the 3B mod kit and the mounting bracket necessary for the installation of an IROSA. That is an 8-foot-long bag, which here on Earth would weigh well over 300 pounds.
77, the emergency MPEV is closed. The node 1, that vacuum access port, is connected to the gamma cap. You guys are go for 78.
And Houston copies will take care of 78 through 80, and be advised, EV crew will be hot mic after we complete step 80.
We copy, you guys are going through 80, and EV will be hot mic once you're done with that. We'll be standing by.
Copy that.
So inside the International Space Station, Jack Hathaway communicating with the teams here on the ground with Flight Director Ronak Dave and his Momentum flight team for today's U.S. Spacewalk 96, continuing to work through the step-by-step procedures ahead of today's spacewalk. On the other side of that hatchway is NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Menon, our two spacewalkers for today. 6th of the career for Meyr, 1st for Anil Menon. And then as they continue to work through their procedures, we will hear communication from the crew as they continue to work through their checklist, but also the go for depressurization of the crew lock.
And EV crew, you are hot mic on Space Ground 1.
EV1, good morning, Hashida-san.
Here too, let's do this.
Good morning, Jessica and Anil. Let's do this.
Just to make sure I'm on the same page with you, I think that means that you guys are done with 80 and you're ready for me to do 81.
Jack, stand by. We're still working on the other steps. We'll call you when we're ready.
And bye.
And we heard the first communications down to the ground of today's coverage from Jessica Meyr and Anil Menon doing the comms checks with the team here in the International Space Station Flight Control Center. Meanwhile, Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno continuing to work through their step-by-step procedures ahead of depressurization of the crew lock of the Quest airlock.
Pick up in step 81, and in step 84, you have a go to perform the crew lock depress, repress cue card, depress section.
Some will go to start in 81, and in 84 we have your go to start the cue card.
Good copy.
EV2, I've got a couple steps for you to verify you're not actually throwing any switches here, but just verify for me on the UIA that the depress power switch is in the on.
Depress pump power switch OFF.
Okay, copy OFF, and one more verified step that the depress pump enable LED is on.
Enable is on, ON.
All right, that's the completion of this, and I'm moving into the crew lock depress cue card if you want to follow along.
I'm tracking.
All right, step 1 on the crew lock depress cue card on the UIA, and they'll go ahead and take this depress pump power switch to on.
Currently on. Depress pump power switch.
We're going to count 10 seconds. All right, that's a good 10 seconds. Step 2, you're going to take the depress pump manual isolation valve to open and expect to get an alert tone.
Depress pump manual isolation valve open.
All right, continue to monitor your suit P gauge, stays below 5.5, and if it hits 5.5 or greater, go ahead and let us know. Stop the depress, let us know if the gauge gets above 5.5.
V1.
This is true.
So with those procedures that were read out from Jack Hathaway communicating with Anil Mennon, as well as the teams here on the ground in Mission Control Houston, we have received the go for depressurization of the crew lock, which on the other side of that hatchway, you can see through the window the flag of NASA astronaut, or one of the astronauts, Anil Mennon and Jessica Meyr. The crew lock started closer to sea level, about 14.5 pounds per square inch. It is currently falling, and a little more than 11.8 pounds per square inch at the moment. We'll continue to monitor this depressurization of the crew lock. Of course, the teams inside and Mennon and Meyr will also monitor their spacesuits and safety systems as the depressurization takes place, along with Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno, who you see in the foreground. And again, depressurization of the crew lock is underway just shortly before the start of today's U.S. Spacewalk 96, now approaching at 10 pounds per square inch. We welcome you back inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at Mission Control Houston, as we are transferring communication satellites and bouncing between the two, and we will bring you back views inside the International Space Station as depressurization of the crew lock is underway ahead of today's U.S. Spacewalk 96 with NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon. Flight Director Ronak Dave and his Momentum flight team you see before you, monitoring today's spacewalk. Flight Director Chris Dobbins joining in to his left. He will be the Flight Director for a future spacewalk, part of a busy month of August for the International Space Team and Spacewalk team. Stephanie Wilson, who just departed the screen, she will be the spacewalk communicator working with Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon through today's procedures. And Jack's astronaut Aki Hoshide on the top part of your screen, he will be the CAPCOM, or capsule communicator, and relaying communications to the Expedition 75 crew that remains inside of the International Space Station. And as we return aboard the International Space Station itself, the depressurization of the crew lock continuing and now approaching 8.5 pounds per square inch as Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno continue to monitor that depressurization. Now approaching 7.5 pounds per square inch inside of the crew lock, where Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon preparing for today's spacewalk and the installation of hardware to the 3B mod kit and mass canister aboard the International Space Station in preparations for the rollout of a International Space Station rollout solar array to help augment the power of the orbiting laboratory. Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno supporting today's spacewalkers. Also monitoring from the orbiting laboratory. And as we sit this morning at this hour, the International Space Station currently flying over the South Pacific, about to make its way to the northwest portion of South America.
Houston on 1. We expect another 3 minutes until 5 psi.
Copy, 3 minutes. We're seeing about, pass through about 6.5 now, and EV1 and EV2, you can expect an alert tone at 6, and we'll check in with you again at 5 psi.
EV1, 2.
Communications with Jack Hathaway and the team here on the ground inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room. And also relaying those comms to the 2 astronauts inside of the crew airlock as the depressurization continuing on. Now it's 6.3 pounds per square inch inside of that crew lock. And again, all of these procedures on the checklist ahead of today's U.S. Spacewalk 96. And once the checkouts for both these suits and the safety procedures for both Mennon and Meyr are complete, the hatch will open outside of the Quest airlock to welcome them out into the vacuum of space, and we'll await the call for the suits to be transferred to battery power, and that will again mark the official start time of today's spacewalk. Now approaching 5.5 pounds per square inch inside the crew lock, which is on the other side of that hatchway you see before you. Sophie Adno and Jack Hathaway also monitoring from the equipment lock of the Quest airlock of the International Space Station.
EV2, you guys are about 5.5 psi now. When we get to 5, we're going to have you do a step, so we'll just roll through.
Copy.
And there you hear the commands that once we reach 5 psi inside of the crew lock, there will be additional commands and checkouts performed before continuing on with the depressurization to bring that crew lock down to vacuum and allow Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon to exit the International Space Station.
All right, to EV2, if you'd reach out and put your hand on the depress pump manual isolation valve and move it to the closed position, you'll get an alert tone.
Depress man ISO valve is closed.
We're just going to watch for a second, watch the pressure stabilize. All right, we see you guys stable at 5 for EV1 and EV2. On your DCMs, take your display switch into status until you see leak check, question mark. Then a long yes, and follow the displayed instructions. Let us know when you're done.
EV1.
EV2.
And now the crew lock continuing to hold stable at close to 5 psi, pounds per square inch, as Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno working with NASA astronauts Jessica Meier and Anil Menon through today's checkouts ahead of U.S. Spacewalk 96, and of course monitoring from the ground as well and communicating some of these checkouts are today's U.S. Spacewalk 96 team. And there you see in the navy blue suit right in the middle of your screen is Ronak Dave, the flight director for today's spacewalk, and his Momentum flight team overseeing everything.
EV2 leak check complete, going to EVA.
Copy, 2 good leak checks, and then step 6, let us know when you guys are in EVA. Copy, EV1 EVA.
EV2 EVA.
The EV2 EVA. And EV2, if you take the depressed pump manual isolation valve to open, you should get an alert tone.
Depress pump manual isolation valve is open.
Copy that. Sophie's going to take the emergency MPEV out here to open. All right, the emergency MPEV is open out here. Both of you monitor your suit P gauge, stay below 5.5, and let us know if it doesn't.
EV1.
EV2.
Two good leak checks reported by NASA astronauts Jessica Meier and Anil Menon as they are inside the crew lock of the Quest airlock with support from Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno, as we have now resumed the depressurization of the crew lock ahead of today's spacewalk, U.S. Spacewalk 96, as we approach now 4 pounds per square inch, bringing down that crew lock from about 14.5 all the way down to vacuum. And from here, we'll continue to monitor on the ground with the flight control team, the Momentum Flight, and Flight Director Ronak Dave. And stand by as we get ready to begin the official start of today's EVA. And again, that'll occur when the suits are moved over to battery power for both Mennon and Meier. But at the current moment, the pressure continuing to drop inside of the crew lock, now approaching 3.5 pounds per square inch. Pressure inside the crew lock continuing to fall, now approaching 3 pounds per square inch.
Decreasing through 3.0 psi. Our next step's at 2.0 psi.
Again, the crew continuing to work with the teams on the ground and the 2 astronauts for today's spacewalk, and Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon through their pre-spacewalk procedures. And we heard that the next round of procedures will come as we near closer to 2 pounds per square inch, currently at 2.75. Again, we welcome you to the live coverage of today's U.S. Spacewalk 96 as depressurization of the crew lock inside of the Quest airlock well underway, now approaching close to 2.10 pounds per square inch, monitored on your screens by Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno.
2.0 psi. If you'd reach out, put your hand on the depress pump manual isolation valve and move it to the closed position.
Press pump man ISO valve is closed.
All right, we're looking at the pressure for a second or two. Right, and on the UIA EV2, you can take the depress pump power switch to the off position.
Press pump power switch is off. OFF.
Copy off OFF. It's been great working with you guys. We'll see you in a couple hours. Houston, you got them.
Thank you so much, Jack and Sophie.
Thanks, guys.
Good morning, Jessica and Anil. Thank you, Jack and Sophie. We are ready for your initial tether configurations for egress.
Good morning, Stephanie. I can start the tether config. I have my waist tether on my right side of my mini workstation, and I have the small hook on my right steering extender gate closed slider lock. I have my anchor hook also on my workstation. I can see that my green reel is unlocked. My yellow hook is on the green reel, that's gate closed slider lock. My red reel is unlocked, and I can see my green hook is on the red reel that is unlocked. I have Anil's anchor hook also on the red reel that is gate closed slider locked. I can see his green reel is unlocked, and I can see his yellow hook on his green reel, gate closed slider locked, and I can see his red reel, so that's just disappearing out of my view. And now can you see the rest of yours?
Yes, red reel's unlocked, and the green hook is on the red reel unlocked. Starting from my left steering extender, I see the small hook of my left waist tether. Close lock black on black. It's attached to the large hook of the airlock waist tether. Both hooks are close lock black on black. And that small hook goes to the airlock steering extender, close lock black on black. My right waist tether is attached to the D-ring extender, close lock black on black with the small hook. The large hook is unlocked on my NWS, and my red hook is on my right D-ring direct. It's close lock black on black.
And we copy all. We need EV1's red hook.
My red hook is gate closed slider lock on my right D-ring extender.
2 good tether configs for EV1 and EV2. Thank you. When crew lock DPDT is about 0, EV crew expect an alert tone.
ET.
Communications from the team here on the ground in Mission Control Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, relaying information shared with today's NASA astronaut and spacewalkers, Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon. That was Stephanie Wilson, the voice you heard on the ground after communications was officially handed over. And thanks to Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno of NASA and ESA respectively for preparing both Mennon and Meyr for today's spacewalk. Currently inside the crew lock where those two astronauts reside, approaching a 1.30 pounds per square inch. And the view you see right now, an external camera aboard the International Space Station looking at the Quest airlock. So as the crew continues to work through its safety tether procedures is what you heard. And again, safety checkouts will be quite often occurring during today's spacewalk. We will await the suits for both astronauts to be turned on to battery power, and that'll officially mark the beginning of today's spacewalk to install a mod kit on the 3B mass canister to set up for the rollout of an International Space Station rollout solar array to help augment the power of the orbiting laboratory. Depressurization of the crew lock continuing to occur as we now are approaching 1 pound per square inch inside of that crew lock of the Quest airlock, which you see the external views of outside of the International Space Station. Right now, the International Space Station orbiting 260 miles above the Earth, currently passing over the Atlantic Ocean. We'll stand by and continue to monitor the falling of that pressure inside the crew lock, now about to hit 1 pound per square inch, and await for the calls to have the crew and Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon switch their suits onto battery power, and then we'll begin the procedures to begin opening the hatch. And for Jessica Meyr, that will begin what will be her 6th spacewalk of her career, her 3rd on her current time aboard the International Space Station. And for Anil Mennon, this will be his very first venture out into space. We welcome you to today's live coverage of U.S. Spacewalk 96 outside of the International Space Station, featuring NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon as the depressurization of the crew lock continuing onward, now under 1 pound per square inch, 0.88 pounds per square inch currently is the depressurization moving forward. Everything so far in their pre-spacewalk procedures have gone by the book. With the pre-breathe, the install of the safer and MEDOX canisters, the crew moved from the equipment lock to the crew lock. Additional safety checkouts and procedures performed by both the astronauts themselves and their support groups, both Jack Hathaway and Sophie Adno aboard the International Space Station offering assistance, as well as the teams here in Mission Control Houston.
Airlock Houston, we are tracking about 4.5 minutes to 0.
V1.
And with that communication, the relay from Stephanie Wilson up to the crew is that they are now tracking about 4.5 minutes until that crew lock will reach 0, the vacuum of space. And we continue to monitor and follow along with the process. But again, next steps from here will be the crew moving their suits, their spacewalk suits, to battery power to begin the formal beginning of today's spacewalk. And then the go will be given to open up the hatch thermal covers and the hatch itself before beginning their egress to begin today's spacewalk. And again, today's spacewalk performed by Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon. They will exit the Quest airlock here in only a few more moments, and that will begin their journey to install hardware that will modify the station's 3B power channel and prepare it for a future installation of an International Space Station rolled out solar array. And that solar array will be scheduled for delivery a little bit later this year aboard NASA's SpaceX's 35th Commercial Resupply Services mission. It will be the 7th IROSA and will provide additional power to support critical station operations, including its safe and controlled deorbit. Now, 2 minutes relayed to the pounds per square inch to reach 0, the vacuum of space, currently sitting at 0.68. Part of today's EVA tasks are to install the mod kit, the construction of the mod kit for the 3B mast canister, and route the IROSA cables necessary to then power up that future IROSA and connect it to those power channels for the space station. And of course, for Anil Mennon and Jessica Meyr, set up that mast canister and the 3B mod kit to a good configuration, a good position for that future EVA and eventual rollout of the solar array. Continuing to monitor along the depressurization of the crew lock of the Quest airlock, which inside the view you see here of the Quest airlock is NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon, approaching 0.60 pounds per square inch as it is being brought down to vacuum. All initial checks and safety checkouts have gone by the book, and we'll await the commands from the team here on the ground in support of today's U.S. Spacewalk 96 for instruction to move their spacesuits to battery power, which will bring the official start of today's spacewalk, and then the commands to begin opening the hatch thermal cover and begin egress or exiting procedures to move into the vacuum of space. And for Jessica Meyr, again, this will be her 6th spacewalk of her career, the 3rd of her current mission as a member of NASA SpaceX's Crew 12 and the current International Space Station commander. And she will add to what has already become an impressive total of time out in space, 36 hours and 6 minutes as it stands this moment. And for Anil Mennon, who just arrived to the orbiting laboratory only a few weeks ago after launching on July 14th as a member of the Soyuz MS-29 crew. This is his first spaceflight, and this will be his first adventure outside into the vacuum of space. And for today's 3B mod kit installation, we mentioned that this would be a part of a package deal that will be brought up to IROSAs and pairs on the NASA SpaceX 35th Commercial Resupply Services mission. The 7th IROSA set will be a part of the 2A mod kit channel that was completed in portions back in March of 2026 and beginning in May of 2025. And then for this 3B power channel mod kit, it would be the 8th rollout solar array to make its way out of the International Space Station. Now reaching 0.50 pounds per square inch, half a pound per square inch as it currently stands inside of the crew lock of the Quest airlock of the International Space Station. As we continue to methodically bring that down to zero, to the vacuum of space, before NASA astronauts Jessica Meier and Anil Menon will begin today's 96th U.S. spacewalk and install the IROSA mod kit on the 3B mass canister.
Erlac Houston, we see crew lock P less than 0.5. We are ready for you to verify EV hatch gauge.
Work. And now I'm coming left a little bit toward your seat to reset.
I'm moving my feet up.
I see negative 0.4.
That is a good number. You have a go to open the EV hatch and stow it.
Work.
Communication is there as the team has received the go to open the EV hatch, as Jessica Meier radioing down to the team here in Mission Control Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room that is now in work as we are under now 0.20 pounds per square inch inside the crew lock, and we'll wait the call to hear that crew switch their suits to battery power, formally begin today's EVA or spacewalk extravehicular activity. And then from there, the views you see on your screen, the external cameras on board the International Space Station will begin to see movement and eventual exiting and egressing of the two NASA astronauts.
A little bit toward you.
Yes. I'm moving the cable bag out of your way to create space.
The hatch is open. I'm just trying to slide it back to the hatch key.
Yep. Okay, you should have more space. You'll see you have about a foot if you need to go a foot. Body.
Okay, I got the right position now. Got it. Thank you. All right, hatch is open.
Copy, hatch open. For Jack and Sophie, take emergency MPEV to closed.
MPEV closed.
Copy that. That completes crew lock depress. Moving on to post depress. On your DCMs, take your power switches to bat. Stagger switch those. Expect in a warning tone.
Okay, copy and work. Power that.
EV2 power is that.
Take display switches to Pro to verify functional display.
EV1 functional.
EV2 functional.
On the UIA, take power EV1, EV2, 2 switches to off, OFF.
EV1 power off. EV2 power off.
Copy
Expected
check.
water off message.
Copy expected water off message. Check power EV1, EV2 LEDs, 4 of them off, OFF.
4 off, OFF.
EV1 has the expected CP high.
Also copy expected SUP high. On your DCMs, disconnect the SCU from the DCM and install the DCM cover.
Mark.
Ten seconds, 20-second handover.
The LOS, but EV1 has SCU disconnected and detached, and DCM covers up.
EV2 is disconnected into the pouch, DCM cover is up.
Copy all EV1, EV2. On the crew lock, check depress pump man ISO valve is closed.
Press pump man ISO valve is closed.
On your DCMs, take temperature control valves to max hot.
Mark. EV1 max hot.
EV2 max hot.
Take water switch to on.
EV1 water on.
EV2 water on.
Check DCM blank, bite off.
DCM blank, bite off.
DCM blank, bite off.
Take your temperature control valves as you desire and report the settings to us.
Thank you for joining us for today's live coverage of
EV2 set at 7.
Copy EV16, EV27. Please report all subsequent TCV changes to us. Report suit P gauge pressure.
EV1 4.2 on the CP gauge.
EV2 is 4.2 gauge.
Copy 4.2 for both EV1 and EV2 on the suit P gauge. You can set your visors as required for day.
One.
EV2.
And we have good suit parameters on the ground. We will take the airlock VRIV step also from the ground. That completes post-depress. Jessica, we are ready for you to open the hatch thermal cover, release the hook from the magnetic plate D-ring, attach the hook to the stowage tether point, and cinch the strap until snug. Confirm 6 lines visible.
Okay, copy and work.
And we again welcome you to today's live coverage of U.S. Spacewalk 96. We're just a couple of moments ago at 7:33 a.m. Central Time, 8:33 a.m. Eastern. The suits to NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Menon have been switched on to battery power. They just completed their post-depress checklist that you heard in communication with Spacewalk communicator Stephanie Wilson, you see on your screen here, sitting next to Flight Director Ronak Dave. So again, the official start time of today's Spacewalk, 7:33 a.m. Central Time, 8:33 a.m. Eastern, as the International Space Station was flying over Germany.
You can egress the airlock and turn on your HECA.
We are currently experiencing communications handovers between satellites as expected, and the team is monitoring, so we will keep things here inside of Mission Control Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, as the team's actively working through today's pre-spacewalk procedures. Steve Villano, the lead spacewalk officer, along with Drew Burr and Lucas Winder, the spacewalk task officers to support today, along with Matt Hahn, the spacesuit support team, and Andrew Francis and his airlock support team. We also heard commands on Jessica Meyr, NASA astronaut currently in work to...
I have a cutter down, and I have my HECA turned on.
And as we regain communication and receive views, there we see Jessica Meyr outside of the Quest airlock, as she has now formally begun her 6th spacewalk of her career. And we will monitor Jessica's progress through today. You can see towards the top of her backpack the portable life support system, the red stripes.
On your BRT taped towards your head, and you can use an adjustable from your mini workstation as a load-alleviating strap as desired for translation.
On copies.
Strap bag is between the hatch and the staging bag, so it's going to take me a second to try to free that.
Okay, take your time. I'm getting my BRT ready.
So Jessica Meyr now outside of the Quest airlock. NASA astronaut Anil Menon still inside. For Jessica, she mentioned the BRT, that is the body restraint tether that creates and provides greater body positioning and stability, and that is when working in close proximity to the International Space Station and being able to retain the use of both of her hands. And she will need that because Anil Menon is going to hand her the strut bag for today's spacewalk that consists of 6 struts and a mounting base for the future use of an International Space Station rollout solar array. And that bag, quite large, 8 feet in long, and weighing here on Earth what would be 330 pounds. And that mass will be handed over to Jessica Meyr to then have connected to her suit, and then once that is handed over, Anil Menon will make his way out of the hatchway and get his first views and begin officially his first spacewalk.
By there, I'm going to try to rotate to the handle side. Handle, yeah. You keep turning it that direction.
Yep, I can.
Okay, I've got my hand on the handle.
Okay.
And I'm going to get my BRT ret on it. Pause there. Okay, I have my BRT ret on it. I'm going to release this. Have the ret side actually.
I do have the release. I can easily release the ret if you'd like me to.
You can go ahead. I have it ready.
is released.
I copy. I'm going to pull it out a little bit more. Okay, hold it there.
We get our first views from the helmet cam of NASA astronaut Jessica Meier outside the Quest airlock, being handed the strut bag for today's U.S. spacewalk. Being handed over to her from NASA astronaut Anil Mennon. And you can see those body restraint tethers attached to the side of the space station. And there in the background, you can see the solar array wing and the Northrop Grumman NG-24 vehicle and cargo craft attached to the station. And again, that strut bag, quite large, 8 feet long, weighing over 300 pounds, that has now been handed over to Jessica Meier. So Jessica Meier continuing to maneuver her body and the strut bag for today's spacewalk. And you can see on the handle of that strut bag for 3B, that is the task for today's spacewalk, to install the IROSA mod kit on the 3B mass canister for her and NASA astronaut Anil Mennon.
Be adjustable, and I'm putting that over to my mini workstation for some extra maneuverability.
And this view again from the helmet cams, the HECA cams from NASA astronaut Jessica Meier.
Bag transfer to EV1 is next.
No copies. In
Okay.
place.
I'm going to refine this bag, I think, a little bit after, come out a little bit more. I like the position I'm in right now to receive the cable bag.
Okay. My handle's coming out first. And give me some station coordinate directions to get it to you.
Wait, stand by, I'm going to get a vet. Stay right there. I'm going to get my red on it.
Right, no problem.
Can you come down a little bit more? I'm going to try to get a red. I want to get a red on the other side.
On the other side, I can help you with that. Hold on. That's easier? Handle feature with you.
Yeah, I've got a rat on it. You can release that rat.
Okay. Thread is off, and I'm putting it on the UIA. It is now on the left side of the UIA and out of the way.
We copy the tether config, and that EV1 has the cable bag. EV2 for met rate, we would like you to pause a couple minutes in the airlock before egressing.
Copy, pause.
So now, just to plan out this egress, I am immediately on the forward side. I have the strut bag on my left and the cable bag on my right. The cable bag is out of your way, I think, but it's just kind of underneath the hatch. You can see it.
I can see it.
But if you come out and then go straight aft, we should be in a good position.
I'll do that. I think a driver for the net rate might be. I had to really get that bag from behind the hatch.
Copy.
We understand. That's why it's notated as EV3 in the procedures. It's a big bag.
Yeah, and I think on that egress, that was what was preventing me from closing the hatch all the way. I couldn't see above it. Sorry, from opening all the way. Then we got past it.
NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Menon working through their procedures. We are now 15 minutes into today's spacewalk, U.S. Spacewalk 96. And there you see Jessica Meyr on the outside of the Quest airlock, and her indicators on the cuff of her pants, the red stripes, the cable bag that houses all the cables, tethers, and necessary equipment for today's spacewalk. To her right-hand side, to her left, are key components for today's work. Outside on the 3B mass canister, where her and Anil Menon will install a mod kit to that canister and set up for the future installation of an International Space Station rollout solar array that will provide additional power to support critical space station operations. So Meyr currently outside of the airlock, Menon still inside, as they have transferred the appropriate equipment bags and are currently pausing for a moment before Anil Menon will make his way out of the Quest airlock and get those first views of what is now 15 minutes into his very first spacewalk.
EV2, nice work on the pause. We show good met rates continue. You have a go to egress the airlock.
Go to egress.
And with that communication, we are seeing the first movements of Anil Menon out of the Quest airlock, as he will join Jessica Meyr. So now both Menon and Meyr have exited the Quest airlock. Meyr with the red stripes on her cuff of her pants closest to this camera view. Anil Menon just on the other side to her right, as they will continue to maneuver into position. They have already transferred today's equipment and tools necessary, the cable bag and the strut bag, for the installation of the mod kit on the 3B mass canister. And then soon they will step into buddy checks, and that is when they will look over each other's spacesuits and check in on each other, make sure everything is okay before proceeding on with today's spacewalk.
And if you have the handle and the...
We go.
So again, the official start time of today's spacewalk, 7:33 a.m. Central Time, is when the suits were transitioned over to a battery power, and we are now 19 minutes into U.S. Spacewalk 96.
Once you get a red on it, you can release that.
Okay, my red is on it, and it's on my VRT as well.
Okay, I can't return it enough. You can push it to me, or you can get it off.
I think given this position, I'm going to rotate towards you.
Okay, I see it. Stand by right there. I've got my red off.
Thank you for the help.
Copy. Nice work between the two of you on that choreography. Jessica, when you're ready, 10, the hatch thermal cover closed. And you'll turn on your HECA when you have...
Open until...
Okay.
You just want it partially closed?
Yes, it's just a partial tending it in the closed direction.
Okay, copy, inward.
And Anil, you can turn on your HECA when you have an opportunity, and after that is buddy checks.
Mills HECA is on.
Copy.
The thermal cover, if you can move those tethers a little bit.
Bring them. Go. Here.
The tandem of NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon have now successfully exited the Quest airlock and are closing the thermal hatch cover. Jessica Meyr would depart first. Anil Mennon would hand her the cable bag and strut bag for today's US EVA and spacewalk.
Move the cable bag out of my way. Ready for buddy check.
Okay, I'm looking at you. I see that your green HECA light is on. Your lights are not on yet, so you can go ahead and turn those on. I see 1, 2, 3 taps. And I see both of your safer handles are down.
Okay. I'm looking at you. I see 1 green light. I see 3 taps up. And can you roll to your left? Can you?
Other way?
Other way. I see 2 handles down.
Okay, and I have a dry half, and I'm going to give a baseline glove check. Gloves look nominal. I have a small black smudge on the middle finger of my left hand. The tip.
I've got dry half and 2 good gloves.
Copy. Good buddy checks, good hat, and good gloves. And for EV1, we copy nominal with the small black smudge on the finger.
Okay, and the thermal cover is not going to stay closed with the cutter coming out there. Do you want us to try to get it closed again?
Jessica, we're happy with the config. Yeah, we just wanted it attended closed, but we're happy with the config. We are ready for you to start translation. I have 2 cautions for you both and 1 caution for EV1. Avoid inadvertent contact with deployed test cable, zenith, and nadir cedar rails to prevent kinks, folds, or real issues. Avoid contact with radiator and flex hoses. And for EV1, keep translation rates below 0.7 feet per second with the strut bag on your BRT.
EV1 copies.
EV2
Good.
Great.
All right.
Yeah, I can do all the adaptations while you translate.
Sounds like a plan.
We concur with that plan. Please verify as part of your buddy checks you saw good tools and tethers on both crew.
I see the tools and tethers on Anil. And a reminder, we've got our slingshot here, so all those wheels are in the middle. I don't see any twists that we don't need.
Concur. Good tools and tethers.
Okay, copy.
Copy. Good tools and tethers. Jessica, you are en route to the anchor hook locations on S1. For Anil, for translation adaptation, you can attempt a body rotation, pitch jaw roll, various hand grips, stable light fingertip hand between handrail and structure, translation without rotation, and attaching local tether and releasing both hands. We are also about 50 seconds to a handover.
Anil, copy all.
Side-by-side views of NASA astronaut Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon as they have just recently completed their buddy checks after exiting or egressing the Quest airlock, successfully handling over the tools. Some of the procedures they went through is to make sure their tethers were attached properly, their safers were in a good setup, and also their HAPS, the helmet absorption pad, the safety device developed by NASA to address any possible risks of water inside the helmets. Everything went well as we now welcome you back inside the International Space Station flight control room, where the teams on the ground continuing to monitor the progress of today's spacewalk, as we are now 26 minutes, 20 seconds, and counting into today's 96th U.S. spacewalk. We're currently switching over communications satellites, and we will bring you back those live views and communications with the NASA astronauts, Ronak Dave and the Momentum flight team overseeing today's spacewalk.
The anchor hook location for EV1's anchor is handrail 3217, the zenith side.
3217.
And for EV2, for your translation adaptation period, we are still seeing met rates a little bit high, so we'd like you to perform the translation adaptation that you need, but be sure to build in a rest before beginning translation for the procedure.
Copy. Thanks for the feedback. Will do.
As we return to views from the helmet cams of NASA astronauts Jessica Meyr and Anil Mennon. This is Jessica Meyr's camera as she is translating across or moving around the International Space Station in preparation for receiving additional equipment necessary for today's spacewalk to install the 3B mast mod kit on the 3B mast canister. The International Space Station currently in an orbital nighttime, so the cameras aboard the spacesuits are now on as the space station now crossing over the Indian Ocean, about to pass over the west coast of Australia at 266 statute miles above Earth. And that is a view of Anil Mennon that is still close to the Quest airlock, continuing his translation adaptation as necessary. As for Jessica Meyr, continuing to make her way across the space station in preparation for today's install. And side-by-side views, there you see Anil Mennon and his helmet cam looking back into the International Space Station in the Quest airlock on the right-hand side. As for Jessica Meyr on the left, continuing her movements across the space station. As the two will be working in tandem today to install that 3B mast, or the mod kit to the 3B mast canister.
I am at the starboard seat of cart, going very slowly with the strap bag, and I'm going to come find our handrail.
Copy, EV1.
And again, side by side.
17, I'm going to put my anchor on 3217.
Houston concurs.
My anchor hook is on 3217, gate closed, slider left.
We copy, Jessica. Good load path for EV1.
"31 minutes into today's U.S. Spacewalk 96, as Anil Menon, still in his translation adaptation near the Quest airlock, and you're hearing communications between Jessica Meyr and the teams on the ground, as Jessica has arrived to a crew equipment translation aid cart, a CETA cart. And those carts that Jessica has arrived at is offering a method to help translate or help move large pieces of equipment. And for Jessica Meyr today in her spacewalk, currently tethered to her space foot is an 8-foot strut bag with a mass of 300 pounds, over 300 pounds.
Two's anchor hook is on 3215. Gate closed, slider locked.
Copy all, Jessica. Good load path for EV2. You can give EV2 a go to release the waist tether.
All right, EV2, I see a good load path here. Have a go to release.
Copy, go.
Stephanie, do I have a go to continue my translation starboard?
Yes, and while you're translating, I have 2 cautions and a warning to read. Do not translate on Sarge DLA. Do not load DLA cable under MLI. Avoid contact with ECU and SSU on unlatched BGA mass canisters. The one warning, avoid inadvertent contact with grapple fixture targets and target pins to prevent suit damage.
One copy.
"33.5 minutes into today's spacewalk as we get side-by-side views of the helmet cams of Jessica Meyr and Anil Menon.
Closing the thermal cover. Thank you.
The cover is closed.
Copy closed. Translate the port CETA cart with 2 for the WIFX bundling to the cable bag.
Port translating now. E2.
So for Jessica Meyr on the left-hand side of your screen, a CETA cart that will help offer her extra support in maneuvering large pieces of equipment, much like the 8-foot-long, 330-pound strut bag that is attached to her space suit. And you just heard commands for NASA astronaut Anil Menon on the right-hand side to begin translation to another crew equipment cart to pick up a WIFX, a worksite interface extender, and this will allow the crew member to reach work sites that are not easily accessible with the articulating a portable foot restraint. We'll hear a lot of those acronyms here soon as well. The APFR, and this WIFX with the APFR adds additional length and maneuverability that will be necessary to help out with today's spacewalk activities. And again, these crew members will be installing an Arosa mod kit on the 3B mass canister of the International Space Station. They will build an upper triangle portion, attach the right and left struts to connect that upper triangle, which also contains the mounting bracket for today's EVA and future IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Relay install. They'll route the cables and then set up that stage for the future EVA that will see the installation of that rollout solar array.
EV2 is at Cedar Rail.
Copy EV2. And for EV1 for translation at S4, follow the keel side non-radiator edge. There's an optional fare lead on the non-radiator side of the grapple fixture. Per your preference, you are en route to your green hook location on X6. On S6, handrail 2042.
Yeah.
That is NASA astronaut Anil Mennon with the cable bag attached to his left, currently translating along the truss of the International Space Station, where he will pick up some additional equipment necessary for today's spacewalk.
EV2 is at the feeder cart.
Copy EV2 at the feeder cart.
So he has arrived, Anil Mennon. You just heard to the CETA cart, that again, the crew equipment translation aid cart. And that is where a lot of the extra equipment outside of the International Space Station and orbital replacement units also could be found.
And you're doing great. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
It is on this CETA cart that Anil Mennon will pick up a WIFEX, a work site interface extender that'll help add extra length and maneuverability with the articulating portable foot restraint that the astronauts use to lock their feet into place as they will work on the 3B mast canister and the 3B mod kit for today's spacewalk. And you can see the ties that are angling off that cable bag. That is where he will bundle that WIFEX extender. A view from the helmet cam of NASA astronaut Anil Mennon, as that is the worksite interface extender that he is currently manipulating and maneuvering, that he just removed from the CETA cart. And he will now bundle to the cable bag that he has in tow.
And we copy, per your discretion.
And by bundling, he will take those wire ties that are attached to the cable bag to secure it before maneuvering any further in today's spacewalk tasks.
is secured. This extender is secured.
We copy. You have the your bundle of joy now, the WIFX bundle to the cable bag. And next is a translation to S6 IEA. Prior to crossing the Sarge, check gauntlets in place.
My met right in.
And this is a good pace here. You're doing a nice job.
Okay, gauntlets are down, and I'm headed out.
I'm at 2042, Stephanie. I'm working on my green hub.
Copy that. Inboard stanchion.
Just over 41 minutes into today's U.S. Spacewalk 96, as NASA astronaut Anil Mennon has successfully bundled the worksite interface extender to the cable bag. And now we'll translate across or move across the International Space Station to the IEA, the Integrated Equipment Assembly.
Copy. Good config. Nice job. Next, stow the strap bag on the outboard non-radiator corner of the IEA using handrails 2045, 2071, and 2070. Tape towards the mass canister.
I'm headed there.
Handrail towards the center of the IEA.
We'll be very happy to go to strap bag.
Yes, you also have an opportunity to drop your bundle of joy.
All right, EV2 is past the MT, and it's 1,000 times easier than in the pool.
Ultra.
Copy all. For EV2, for your translation at S4, you'll follow the keel side non-radiator edge. Also optional fair lead per your discretion on the keel side of the grapple fixture. En route to stowing the cable bag on the inboard non-radiator corner of S6.
Copy, non-radiator side. Optional fair lead.